Tomorrow, you sit for the Labor Law 2 exam at Osmania University. This paper tests the statutory mechanisms that regulate the wages, safety, and security of every worker in India. The syllabus requires a detailed command of 5 distinct units. You must demonstrate proficiency in wage hierarchies, bonus computations, social insurance schemes, terminal benefits, and factory thresholds. These statutes create non-negotiable obligations. Under Indian labor law, specific benefits and safety standards are fixed as statutory floors. They remain mandatory even if an employer attempts to negotiate them away based on financial distress. Examination questions are designed to distinguish between students who rely on general intuition and those who have memorized the specific legal tests. General descriptions of worker rights will not secure high marks. Success requires providing the exact formulas, numerical thresholds, and landmark cases that define these regulations. Citing these precise figures and precedents allows a lawyer to move past abstract constitutional arguments and calculate specific, enforceable monetary awards for a client. Unit 1 centers on the Code on Wages 2019. This statute unified 4 previous acts and established a national floor wage. This floor prevents states competing for industry by reducing minimum wage levels below a central standard. Wage law follows a 3-tiered hierarchy. The living wage is the highest aspiration, intended for a decent standard of life. The fair wage sits in the middle. At the base is the minimum wage, which is the only tier currently enforceable under the law. In 1992, the Rabtaco spread decision established the scientific norms for this minimum. The calculation includes 3 consumption units, 2,700 calories of food per day, 70 yards of clothing per year, and a 20% allocation for fuel and miscellaneous requirements. The Supreme Court ruled in Unichoi v. State of Kerala that an employer's inability to pay is legally irrelevant. Minimum wages are the irreducible cost of doing business. If an employer cannot pay them, they cannot legally run the enterprise. Section 18 of the Code also restricts how wages are deducted. Total deductions in any single month cannot exceed 50% of the wages. Additionally, any fines imposed by an employer are capped at 3% of the monthly wage. Violation of these limits requires the employer to refund the excess. Persistent non-payment or illegal deductions can result in criminal prosecution, carrying fines up to 1 lakh rupees and imprisonment for up to 3 months. The minimum wage is the statutory floor for human survival. The law mandates it be paid regardless of the employer's financial capacity. Unit 2 covers the payment of bonus. In the Indian legal context, a bonus is defined as a synthesis of deferred wages and a share of the profits. Computation follows the full bench formula. You begin with gross profit, then subtract prior charges such as depreciation and income tax. You further deduct the return on capital. The remaining amount is the available surplus. From this surplus, you must extract a specific percentage, 60% for most establishments, or 67% for banking companies. This result is the allocable surplus, which constitutes the final pool for distribution. The law sets the boundaries for this payment. The minimum bonus is fixed at 8.33% of annual wages, while the maximum is capped at 20%. In the Food Corporation of India case, the Supreme Court confirmed that the 8.33% minimum bonus is a statutory obligation. It must be paid even in years where the employer records a loss. To manage surplus fluctuations, the law employs a set-on and set-off system. Excess surplus is carried forward to cover leaner years, while deficiencies are carried forward to be recovered later. This accounting record is strictly limited to 4 years. Bonus payments are therefore a rolling statutory obligation determined by specific accounting formulas and fixed floors. Unit 3 addresses Social Security. You must distinguish between the Employees' Compensation Act, which relies on direct employer liability, and the ESI Act, which is a contributory social insurance scheme. Section 53 of the ESI Act creates an exclusion. Once an establishment falls under ESI coverage, the worker is barred from filing for compensation under the Employees' Compensation Act for the same injury. Under the Employees' Compensation Act, liability is determined by a specific 2-part requirement. The first element is that the injury must arise out of employment. This requires a causal link between the job and the risk that led to the accident. The second element is that the accident must occur in the course of employment. This establishes a temporal connection, meaning the injury occurred during the worker's shift or while performing their duties. In McKinnon-McKenzie versus Ibrahim, the Supreme Court emphasized that these are conjunctive requirements. For a claim to succeed, both the causal and temporal elements must be satisfied simultaneously. Proving employer liability for a workplace injury requires establishing the specific origin of the risk and the precise temporal boundaries of the worker's shift. Unit 4 covers long-term benefits. Recall the 2017 amendments to the Maternity Benefit Act, which increased leave to 26 weeks. The case of Municipal Corporation of Delhi versus female workers confirms that these protections apply to contract and casual staff. When calculating gratuity, precision is vital. The standard formula is 15 days of wages for every completed year of service. However, the legal divisor for a month is 26 working days, not 30. There is also a specific rule for rounding service years. If a worker completes more than 6 months of a partial year, it is rounded up. For example, 4 years and 7 months of service is legally calculated as 5 years. The Employees Provident Fund Act requires a 12% contribution from the employee, which the employer is mandated to match. The specific destination of the employer's 12% contribution is a common point of examination. While the employee's contribution goes entirely to their fund, the employer's portion is divided. 8.33% is diverted to the pension scheme, leaving only 3.67% for the Provident Fund itself. These terminal benefits rely on specific statutory fractions that are intended to test a student's grasp of the actual text of the law. Unit 5 covers the Factories Act 1948. The obligations for health, safety, and welfare scale based on the specific number of workers employed in the premises. You must memorize these thresholds. 30 women workers mandate a creche. 150 workers require shelters, restrooms, and first aid boxes. 250 workers make a canteen mandatory. At higher headcounts, requirements increase. 500 workers mandate an ambulance room and a welfare officer. Once employment reaches 1,000 workers, a dedicated safety officer is required. The 2016 amendment to the Child Labor Act created a universal ban on labor for children under 14. Narrow exceptions exist only for helping in non-hazardous family enterprises after school hours or participating in regulated audiovisual entertainment. Under the Equal Remuneration Act, you must cite McKinnon-McKenzie versus Audrey DaCosta. This case established that historical pay differences cannot legally justify lower wages for women performing the same work as men. In both factory safety and equal protection, the law operates on rigid thresholds and absolute prohibitions, leaving no room for employer discretion. For short note answers, follow a 5-part structure. Provide the definition, the statutory provision, the landmark case, a practical numerical example, and a brief concluding tip for application. For long essay problems, utilize the IRAC method. The application phase is where you must demonstrate how the facts provided in the question intersect with the mathematical rules and legal tests you have prepared. Be certain the core cases appear in your script. Unit Choi for wages, Reptakos Brett for norms, Food Corporation of India for bonus, McKinnon-McKenzie for injury liability, and Municipal Corporation of Delhi for maternity benefits. The statutes you're studying are designed to protect the vulnerable, but the examination rewards the student who is both prepared and precise. The command of detail required to pass this exam is the same command of detail required to protect a worker's livelihood in the legal system. Walk into the examination with confidence.